Welcome to Heard It From Hannah, the place where you'll hear it from me. Howdy friends, Hannah here, and today we're going to talk about entering transactions into your YNAB budget. Now, obviously, entering transactions is a super pivotal and important part of keeping up with your YNAB budget, so I wanted to teach you all the ways you can enter transactions into your budget, just in case you didn't know. We're going to talk about four options. First, linking your bank to your budget so that the transactions come in automatically. That's called direct import. Secondly, we're going to talk about file-based import, which is one we hardly ever talk about. And did you even know about it? And third, we're going to talk about entering transactions yourself. But then fourth, we're going to talk about doing all of them at the same time. And if you're like, why would I give myself more work? Why would I give myself more options? Well, just stick around, stay tuned, and you'll see soon. First method for entering that we're going to talk about is direct import. Now, this is where you actually link your bank account up to your budget so that whenever you swipe a card, that transaction gets sent to your bank and the bank sends it to your budget. When transactions are imported into your budget from the bank, all you gotta do is make sure the category's right, maybe add a memo if you want, and over here on the left, you will approve this transaction. A lot of people really like this, it's really handy, and let me go over a few pros and cons, because everything always has a con, or 12, but this one only has like 2 or 3. So the pros are that your bank is entering the transactions for you, so you don't have to. That's pretty nice. Another pro is that obviously your bank knows every single time you swipe a card, and since it's sending all those transactions to your budget is not going to miss a single transaction. The bank's not gonna forget to charge you for gas, All of them will eventually come into your budget. Which leads me to the cons. First, it can be slow. Sometimes my transactions show up in my budget the exact same day. At like a restaurant where you tip, sometimes you don't get that transaction coming into your budget for days. Another con is that if you're not doing the work yourself, sometimes we can get a little detached from our money situation, especially if you're not checking your budget before you spend to see if you have enough money to spend. And then maybe you forget to update your budget and you're just checking in once a week. Then all of a sudden 37 transactions roll in and you feel like you're being buried under transactions and you're like, how did I get here? Oh gosh, okay, that was pretty impressive. First of all, that's going to be overwhelming, but secondly, you're likely to be pretty out of touch with where your money has been going. Now, that's not the case if you're checking your budget every single time before you spend to determine if I have enough money for this expense or not. But if you fall in a bad habit of just buying willy-nilly like I do semi-frequently, then yeah, direct import does not bring you as much awareness as entering transactions yourself might. Okay, so remember those, tuck them away. Option number 2 for entering transactions is file-based import, and I'm not gonna lie, we don't talk about this one that much. And there's no reason why we don't talk about it. I think it's just a smaller percentage of people that use it, so. File-based import is an awesome option for anyone whose financial institutions won't connect to YNAB. Most banks in the US and Canada connect to YNAB, but internationally speaking, there are a lot of you that could highly benefit from using file-based import. Now, the way this one works is that you go to your financial institution website, fancy word for bank, and you can download a file full of all of the transactions in your checking account, savings account, whatever. All websites are different. For me, I clicked on my checking account and right at the top, there's an option for me to download. There are only 4 file types that are actually accepted by YNAB: QFX, OFX, QIF, and CSV. Once you have your file, you're gonna open your YNAB budget and you will drag and drop that transaction file right on top of your budget. Once they've been imported, you'll need to categorize the transactions to whatever category you want them in. You can rename your payees. Now, for both direct import and file-based import, YNAB never wants to assume that it's entering the transaction the way you want it, so it always asks you to approve the transaction before it's officially added to your budget. So let's say I get this transaction and everything looks right, except I would like to add a memo to it so I can remember what it was actually for. Add the memo and approve. So now let's talk about some pros and cons of using file-based import. One of the major pros of file-based import is that there are a lot of financial institutions that won't connect to YNAB, and if that's the case, you can still use file-based import and get a lot of the perks of direct import. You don't have to enter all the transactions yourself, you can batch enter them at once. It's also a guaranteed way to make sure every single transaction is entered and none of them are missed. But on to the cons, because we have to be realistic. If file-based import is your primary way of entering transactions into your budget, then you're either going to have to do it very often or enter a lot of transactions at the same time. Another con is that sometimes it takes you out of the process a little too much. It could get pretty easy to overspend if you're not using file-based import a lot. Our third way of entering transactions is by doing it yourself. We are big fans of this method at YNAB because it creates the most awareness of how much money you have and where it's going. Let's just add a little transaction right now. Open up your YNAB budget, click the plus sign at the bottom of the app, and it will pull up a new transaction form. You'll add in how much money you spent, where you spent it at, which category the money should be coming from, the date it happened, which will usually be today. And then you have some different options for customizing, such as leaving a memo, adding a flag, or putting the transaction on a recurring schedule. Save that transaction. Now we can see that that transaction is right in our budget, good to go. So what are the pros and cons of entering yourself? Like I said, the biggest pro is the awareness. You'll be way more in tune with how much money is coming out of your account if you're entering it yourself versus if you're waiting on the bank to do it. And that might inspire you to pull in the reins a little bit. Second pro is that your budget will always be live and up to date. Let's say I go to the grocery store, I buy a week's worth of groceries, load them up in the car, and when I sit on my driver's seat, I can enter that transaction right away. My husband could go to the same grocery store 5 minutes later and the category would be updated with the correct amount of money left. Whereas if you use direct import, that transaction you spent at the grocery store might take another day to come in. Your spouse won't see it and he'll just spend willy-nilly. Now all of a sudden your grocery category is overspent. Entering transactions yourself is a great way to make sure that that doesn't happen. But then we have our cons, and the first one is that it does take time and you do need to build the habit. Now, when I say it takes time, I mean it takes 30 seconds. So it's not that much time, but habits are hard to build. So you will need to develop the habit of recording your transactions every time you spend money. Another con is that you could just be a human and enter your transaction incorrectly. It happens. The other con is that you can definitely forget to add a transaction. It's easy, let me tell you. If you're only relying on yourself for keeping your budget up to date, you gotta be really on top of it. Now, if you're reconciling often, you can catch your mistakes no problem, but sometimes we don't reconcile our budgets with our bank accounts as often as we should, and we might not catch a mistake until it's been a while. And if your budget is inaccurate, then that means you don't actually know how much money you truly have to spend. Which brings me to the fourth way you can enter transactions into your budget, which is doing all of them. That's right, you can use every single one of these methods simultaneously and your budget will handle it seamlessly. But why would I want to use all of these options simultaneously? Well, you'll get the pros of every single entering method, and the pros altogether cancel out all the cons. So it's kind of perfect. Now, primarily, we would recommend entering transactions yourself because of those major pros of awareness and your budget always being live, up to date, and as accurate as possible. So anytime you're out and about spending money, swiping your card by getting groceries, maybe buying new clothes for the kids, getting a coffee at the drive-thru, whatever it is, record that right when it happens. Then for the expenses that are recurring, they're fixed, they're the same every month, go ahead and let direct import take care of that for you. For example, I always am prepared for rent. That is the first expense I make sure to fully fund. It's always due on the same day every month. It's always for the same amount. So that's one that I just let direct import take care of. Once that transaction hits the bank sends it to my budget, and then I categorize it to my rent category. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. In fact, I usually let direct import take care of all of my subscriptions, all of my utilities, basically anything that I have set up on autopay. So let's talk about duplicates. A lot of people are scared to enter transactions themselves and utilize direct import because they're afraid if they add a transaction and then that same transaction comes in from the bank that they will have duplicate transactions in their budget. Well, your budget is pretty smart. It knows how to identify when two transactions are the same, and so rather than entering two into your budget and having duplicates, it actually links them so the two become one. It's a very beautiful thing. You'll know when two transactions have been linked up because there's literally a link symbol to the left of it, and if you click on that, you can approve, unmatch, or reject that transaction. If you've been afraid to link your bank accounts, there's literally nothing to be afraid of. It only gives you more of a safety net knowing that it'll always enter any transactions you forgot to enter, or if you entered it wrong, it'll enter it right, and then you can fix your mistake from there. And don't forget about file-based import. Now, for those of you thinking, I would never use file-based import, that's just not me. I don't know. Listen, banks are weird, and sometimes your bank connection just is gone for 2 weeks. Why? We don't know. So for those 2 weeks you've been entering yourself, but you're kind of afraid, what if I forgot a transaction? No problem. Not a problem. For those 2 weeks, you can use file-based import, and it operates just like direct import. The only difference is you are deciding which transactions come in and what time they come in. If you add a bunch of transactions through file-based import that you already entered yourself earlier that week, it'll link them up, it'll take care of it. You won't have any duplicates, but it may catch a transaction that you forgot to enter, or, I've been doing this more lately, a transaction that I've entered twice, just like I want to be spending more money. Yeah, I don't know. So we get all the pros of all the methods. We are aware of how much money we're spending. Our budget is live and up to date at all times. If I forget to enter a transaction myself, direct import will eventually send that transaction into your budget, meaning that you're not gonna miss anything. So friends, if you are a one transaction method kind of YNABer, consider this your sign to try using all the methods simultaneously. You will be amazed at how much more aware you are of money going in and out of your account. Take the step, link those bank accounts. Try to build a new habit, enter your transactions as you're spending the money. You never know, could be a game changer. Of course, there's probably a lot more to say about this that I haven't said, and if you want to learn more, we have plenty of help docs down below. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you guys next week. Okay, I'll be honest, we are currently having a gnat problem, and if you see any crawling around on the lens, that's entirely possible, so sorry. It can fly. There's a bug. Then, oh gosh, bug. Jeez. I think there's a bug in my eye. But on to the cons.